The autumn wind whispered through Shadow Creek Valley, rustling the golden leaves that carpeted the ground around Eleanor Miller's isolated ranch. Most folks passing by would see nothing remarkable about the modest homestead, just a weathered barn, a well-maintained fence line, and a lone woman in her early 40s tending to a magnificent black stallion. What caught the eye, if anyone looked close enough, was how the horse moved, fluid grace masking coiled power, much like its owner. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Thunder, as Eleanor called him, wasn't just any horse. His muscles rippled beneath a coat that seemed to absorb the fading daylight, and his eyes held an intelligence that unnerved visitors. As Eleanor brushed his flank, her movements carried the same measured precision as her mount's, though few would notice. Her grey, streaked dark hair was tied back practically, and her simple work dress concealed both her figure and the scars earned in another life. 3 riders appeared on the ridge overlooking her property, their shapes stark against the autumn sky. Eleanor's hand paused mid-brush, but she didn't look up. Thunder's ears flicked forward then back, a signal they'd practiced countless times. The riders were armed, heavily so, and making no attempt to conceal their approach. "Easy now," Eleanor murmured, though whether to Thunder or herself wasn't clear. The stallion's muscles tensed beneath her hand, but he remained perfectly still, exactly as she'd trained him. From the ridge, it would appear the horse was half asleep while being groomed. Nothing could be further from the truth. The riders drew closer, and Eleanor could hear the creak of their saddles, the jingle of spurs that had seen too much use. The lead rider's horse, a sorrel with a mean look, had the distinct gait of an animal pushed too hard for too long. Rustlers, most likely, or worse. They'd been plaguing the valley for months now, growing bolder with each successful raid. "Morning, ma'am!" the lead rider called out, his voice carrying false cheer. He was a big man, with a beard that didn't quite hide the scar running along his jaw. "Fine-looking horse you got there." Eleanor straightened slowly, playing every inch the cautious. "Widow, can I help you, gentlemen?" She kept her voice mild, with just a touch of wariness. Thunder remained motionless beside her, but she could feel the slight shift in his weight, preparing. "Matter of fact, you can," the man replied, guiding his horse. Closer. His companions spread out slightly, a practiced movement that confirmed Eleanor's suspicions. "Name's Marcus Webb. My friends and I are looking to acquire some fresh mounts. That black stallion of yours would suit us just fine." Eleanor's hand rested on Thunder's neck, feeling the controlled power in his muscles. To the riders it would. Looked like a nervous gesture. It was actually a signal, one of many they'd perfected over years of partnership. "I'm afraid Thunder's not for sale," she replied. "Though I hear the Carson Ranch up north might have some horses to trade." Webb's friendly demeanor slipped slightly. "Don't believe I mentioned anything about buying, ma'am." His companions' hands drifted toward their weapons. "Times are hard. Sometimes folks need to make arrangements that aren't exactly proper business deals." The autumn wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of approaching rain. Eleanor's fingers moved slightly against Thunder's neck, another silent signal. The stallion's breathing changed imperceptibly, preparing for what might come. These men had no way of knowing they weren't just facing a lone widow and her horse. They couldn't know that every detail of this encounter, from Eleanor's position relative to the barn to Thunder's seemingly relaxed stance, was the result of years of preparation. 3 men threatening a widow, Eleanor observed, her voice carrying a new edge that made Webb's horse shift nervously. "Your mothers must be so proud." The second rider, younger and wearing a deputy's badge that Eleanor would bet wasn't his, laughed harshly. "Ain't about pride, lady. It's about taking what we want. Now step away from that horse before this gets unpleasant." Eleanor didn't move. The wind tugged at her skirts, revealing momentarily the unusual boots she wore. Boots designed specifically for what might happen next. You boys really should have asked around about Thunder before trying this, she said almost sadly. He's got a reputation of his own, you see. One that's got nothing to do with looking pretty. Webb's face darkened. Last warning, woman. Move. Away from the horse and go inside. We'll even let you keep your other nag in the barn, seeing as we're reasonable men. Reasonable men, Eleanor echoed, her hand still resting on Thunder's neck. Tell me something, Mr. Webb. In all your reasonable planning, did you ever wonder why a widow living alone would keep a war horse? Did you even recognize what he is? For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Webb's face. His eyes moved to Thunder, really seeing him now. The subtle scars on his flanks, the way his muscles were tensed despite his seemingly relaxed posture, the intelligence in his gaze. Too late, Webb recognized the signs that any cavalryman would have spotted immediately. Because Thunder here, Eleanor continued, her voice carrying clearly in the autumn air, he's not just any horse. He served in the border wars. 5 years of combat, trained by the best cavalry master in 3 territories. Of course, that was before I got him, before I added my own refinements to his education. The younger rider's hand had strayed to his gun, but he looked less certain now. Even his stolen deputy's badge couldn't hide his growing unease. Thunder's eyes tracked every movement, his breathing still perfectly controlled. Eleanor's fingers moved again, another signal. You're lying, Webb said, but his voice carried doubt now. Ain't no cavalry horse ever came this far north. Eleanor's laugh carried on the wind. You know what's interesting about lies, Mr. Webb? They don't usually come with documentation. Her free hand gestured toward Thunder's left flank, where a careful observer might notice the small brand, the mark of the 3rd Cavalry Regiment, clear as day for those who knew what to look for. The 3rd rider, who hadn't spoken until now, suddenly cursed. Webb, that brand, I seen it before. My brother served with the 3rd, said their horses were worth more than gold, trained to... His voice trailed off as Thunder's head came up slightly, nostrils flaring. Trained to what? Eleanor asked, though she knew the answer. The wind had shifted again, carrying the scent of the approaching storm and something else, the subtle smell of more riders approaching from the north. Webb's reinforcements, no doubt, though they wouldn't arrive in time to matter. Last chance, Webb snarled, his composure cracking. Get away from that horse or... His threat cut off as Thunder moved, so fast it seemed impossible for an animal. His size. One moment he was standing quietly beside Eleanor, the next he had pivoted precisely, placing himself between her and the riders. His head was up now, ears forward, and gone was any pretense of being a simple ranch horse. You see, Eleanor continued, her voice carrying the weight of experience, most folks think cavalry horses are just trained to ignore gunfire and charge on command. That's true enough, as far as it goes. But the best ones, the ones that survived, year after year of combat, they learned something more. They learned to read men's intentions, to spot a weapon before it's drawn, to move faster than a bullet when they need to. The autumn wind gusted stronger, and with it came the first drops of rain. Thunder stood rock steady, his every muscle coiled and ready. The position he'd taken wasn't random. It gave Eleanor clear lines of movement in 3 directions, while preventing the riders from spreading out further. So I'm going to explain something, Eleanor said, her hand still resting on Thunder's neck. That nervous energy your horses are showing, they know what Thunder is. Animals recognize a predator when they see one. Right now, they're trying to warn you that you've made a very serious mistake. Webb's hand moved toward his gun, but before he could reach it, Thunder demonstrated exactly why he'd earned his name in the border wars. The stallion's rear hoof struck the ground once, hard, sending a spray of dirt and golden leaves into the air. The sound cracked like a gunshot, causing Webb's horse to rear in panic, nearly unseating him. That, Eleanor noted calmly, was a warning. The next one won't be. Webb struggled to control his spooked mount, his earlier confidence evaporating. Like morning dew, the younger man with the stolen badge tried to circle around, but Thunder's positioning had created what any cavalry officer would recognize: a tactical advantage that left the would-be thieves with no clear line of approach. "Miss," the third rider spoke again, his voice carrying recognition and growing fear. "That animal, during the border wars, they called them shadow mounts, said they could fight better than most men." He began backing his horse away slowly. "Webb, we need to—" "Shut up!" Webb's rage barely masked his uncertainty. "It's just a horse and some woman's tricks, ain't nothing more." Eleanor's fingers traced a pattern on Thunder's neck, another signal, one that made the stallion shift his weight with predatory grace. "You mentioned arrangements earlier, Mr. Webb. Let me suggest one. Leave now, while you still can. Tell whoever sent you that Shadow Creek Valley isn't the easy target they think it is." A distant rumble of thunder. The storm was getting closer. The air grew thick with tension and the metallic scent of approaching rain. Webb's companions had unconsciously backed their mounts several paces away, their animals' instincts overriding their riders' bravado. "You don't understand your situation," Webb tried one last time, but his words lacked conviction. "We've got friends coming." "From the north," Eleanor interrupted. "Yes, I know. Thunder caught their scent about the same time. He picked up the knife in your boot, and the derringer your young friend is trying to hide." Her voice hardened. "But see, that's the thing about cavalry horses. They're trained to handle multiple threats. Numbers don't impress them much." As if to emphasize her point, Thunder executed another precise movement, his hooves placing with deliberate care that spoke of years of training. The motion seemed almost casual, but it had shifted his position to give him clear access to all. 3 riders, while maintaining protection of his handler. The younger man's nerves broke first. "This ain't worth it," he declared, wheeling his horse around so fast he dropped the hidden derringer. It landed in the golden leaves with a dull thud that made Thunder's ears flick forward momentarily, Webb's face contorted with rage and embarrassment. "You yellow-bellied." But his words cut off as Thunder moved again, this time with frightening speed. The stallion's teeth snapped shut inches from Webb's knee, a warning so precisely calculated it left no doubt about what would happen if he chose to escalate further. "That's 2 warnings," Eleanor observed quietly. "There won't be a third." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Through the tension, she felt the subtle vibrations in the ground, hoofbeats approaching from the north. Webb's reinforcements were getting closer, but they'd find a very different situation than they expected. The autumn wind carried another rumble of thunder, closer now, and with it came the first real drops of rain. "You've made your point," the third rider said, already turning his horse. "Webb, live to fight another day. That's a war horse, and she—" He paused, studying Eleanor with new eyes. "She knows too much about cavalry tactics to be just some widow." Webb's hand had strayed toward his gun twice more, but each time Thunder's positioning had prevented him from drawing. Now, finally, reality seemed to sink in. His mount, still trembling from Thunder's earlier display, needed little encouragement to back away. "This ain't over," Webb snarled, but the threat sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Actually," Eleanor replied, her voice carrying the certainty of someone who had faced far worse, "it is. You just don't know it yet." The rain began to fall in, earnest as the would-be horse thieves retreated, their mounts more than willing to put distance between themselves and Thunder. Eleanor watched them go, her hand still resting on her stallion's neck, feeling the controlled power in his muscles slowly ease. Only when the riders had disappeared over the ridge did she allow herself a small smile. "Well done, old friend," she murmured to Thunder, "though I suspect our day isn't over yet." The stallion's ears flicked in agreement as the sound of approaching riders grew stronger. Whatever came next, Eleanor knew that Shadow Creek Valley's reputation was about to change. The story of a widow and her unusual horse would spread, though few would guess the full truth of their partnership or the events that had led them both to this quiet valley. The autumn rain fell steadily now, turning the golden leaves a deeper shade of amber. Eleanor and Thunder remained by the barn, waiting. They had faced worse odds in the border wars, though that was a story few now lived to tell. For the moment, they stood together in the rain, predator and protector both, ready for whatever came. Next, the approaching hoofbeats grew stronger as Eleanor led Thunder into the barn, her movements carrying the same fluid efficiency as her mounts. The interior wasn't what most would expect from a simple ranch building. Reinforced walls lined with carefully arranged tools that could serve multiple purposes. Strategic gaps in the wooden slats provided clear views of all approaches. "Just like old times, isn't it?" she murmured to Thunder as she began removing his seemingly ordinary saddle. Beneath the worn leather lay a masterpiece of military engineering, custom-made during the border wars with hidden compartments and reinforced stirrups designed for combat maneuvers. The stallion's tack alone would have told a knowledgeable observer volumes about his true nature. Eleanor worked quickly, her fingers finding hidden latches and catches that transformed the saddle from its innocent appearance into something far more tactical. Each piece had been modified, improved upon during years of service. The bridle, when properly adjusted, could be released instantly with a specific signal. The blanket beneath concealed light but effective armor. The sound of riders drew closer. Through the barn's strategic gaps, Eleanor counted 6 mounted figures approaching from the north. More of Webb's associates, no doubt, though these moved with military precision that the first group had lacked. Their formation suggested actual cavalry training. This wouldn't be the simple confrontation Webb had planned. Thunder's ears pivoted, tracking the newcomers. His posture shifted subtly, and Eleanor nodded in agreement with his assessment. "Recognized their riding style, did you? 4th Regiment, if I had to guess. Different from your old unit." The stallion's soft nickering held a note of disdain that made Eleanor smile despite the situation. The 3rd Cavalry Regiment had considered themselves elite, a cut above other units. Thunder had never quite lost that attitude, even years after leaving service. A memory surfaced, the day she'd first seen him in action. Not the official cavalry demonstrations where Thunder had performed flawlessly, but the brutal reality of combat during a border raid. She'd been undercover then, gathering intelligence about weapons smugglers when the attack came. Thunder and his original rider had moved like one being, a lethal combination that turned the tide of battle. 2 days later, his rider fell to an assassin's bullet, and Eleanor saw an opportunity that would change both their lives. The approaching riders had stopped just beyond the barn. Their horses' movements suggested military training, but not the elite level that Thunder represented. Eleanor's fingers traced a particular scar on his flank, earned during their escape from the border fortress, a night that had forced them to trust each other completely. "Mrs. Miller," a voice called out, carrying the clipped tones of command. "We heard there was trouble. Webb mentioned you might need assistance." Eleanor's laugh held no humor. "Did he now?" Interesting way to describe his attempted theft. She continued working with Thunder's tack, each piece revealing new aspects of their shared history. "Though I suspect you gentlemen already knew his intentions," a different voice responded, lower and more cautious. "Ma'am, perhaps we should discuss this face to face. No need for any unpleasantness." "Interesting choice of words," Eleanor replied, her fingers finding another hidden catch in Thunder's saddle. This one concealed something that had saved their lives more than once, particularly from men who've taken such care to hide their approach from the main road. A pause followed her words. Then the sound of boots hitting the ground. 3 men dismounting while others maintained their positions. Good cavalry tactics. Though predictable to anyone who'd served, you seem to know something about military matters, Mrs. Miller, the first voice noted, closer now, just outside the barn. Unusual knowledge for a rancher's widow. Eleanor shared a glance with Thunder. The stallion's ears were forward, his muscles ready but not tense. They'd performed this dance before, though not for many years. Knowledge can come from unexpected places, Captain. She put subtle emphasis on the rank. Like how I know you're not really 4th Regiment, despite the accuracy of your uniforms. Another. Pause, heavier this time. What makes you say that, Ma'am? Little details. The way your horses respond to commands. The 4th Regiment uses different signals. And then there's the matter of your spurs. Regulation issue, but worn on the wrong. Boots, small mistakes, but telling ones. Movement outside, the men adjusting their positions. Eleanor's hands never stopped working with Thunder's tack, each piece revealing new complexities. The rain continued to fall, masking some sounds but making others clearer. "You're very observant," the captain said finally. "Perhaps too observant. For your own good. Webb may be a fool, but he did get one thing right. That horse of yours would fetch a fine price from certain buyers who remember the 3rd Regiment's special mounts." Thunder's muscles coiled at the mention of his former unit, but Eleanor's touch kept him steady. She moved to his other side, apparently adjusting his blanket, but actually accessing another hidden compartment. "Interesting that you'd know about that. The 3rd's Warhorse program wasn't exactly common knowledge." "No," agreed the captain, "it wasn't. Just like it's interesting to find one of their finest specimens here, of all places, with a simple widow." A step closer to the barn's entrance. "You want to tell me how that happened?" Eleanor's fingers found what they sought beneath Thunder's blanket. "Actually, I was thinking about stories, like the one about a group of corrupt officers who tried to steal the 3rd's warhorses near the end of the border wars, tried to sell them to the highest bidder." Her voice hardened. "As I recall, that story ended badly for the thieves." The tension outside grew palpable. "That's ancient history," the captain replied, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "And not relevant to our current situation." "Oh, I disagree." Eleanor moved around Thunder again, every movement precise and practiced. "Because that story had an interesting detail that never made the official reports, about how one particular horse and rider disappeared during the chaos, a horse that had been specially trained by Catherine Swift Cathy Reynolds herself." The name dropped into the rain-soaked silence like a stone into still water. Outside, someone cursed softly. Catherine Reynolds had been a legend in the border wars, the cavalry's finest trainer and one of its deadliest operatives. Few knew the full extent of her work with the 3rd Regiment's elite mounts. "Swift Cathy died years ago," the captain said, but his voice carried a new edge of caution. "Did she?" Eleanor continued working with Thunder's tack, each movement revealing more of their shared past. "Interesting thing about deaths in the border wars. Some were more official than actual. Rather like your cavalry credentials, wouldn't you say?" Thunder's ears flicked forward. Someone was trying to circle around to the barn's side entrance. Eleanor smiled slightly. "They never learned." "You seem to know a lot about military matters for a widow, Mrs. Miller." The captain's voice had grown hard. "Almost as much as you know about specialized cavalry training. Care to explain that?" "I could ask you similar questions, Captain," Eleanor replied, her hands never stopping their work. "About how former officers turned arms dealers managed to get their hands on regulation uniforms. About why they're so interested in a retired warhorse. About what really happened the night the 3rd Regiment's stable burned." The silence that followed was heavy with recognition and growing fear. Outside, the rain continued to fall, masking the sound of more men changing positions. But they couldn't hide their movements from Thunder. His ears tracked each step, his body responding to years of training. "You're her, aren't you?" The captain's voice carried a dawning realization. The one who exposed the conspiracy, the trainer who disappeared with the third's finest mount. Eleanor's fingers traced another scar on Thunder's flank, this one from the night of their escape, when choices made in fire and chaos had forged a partnership stronger than any mere military training. "You know what's remarkable about assumptions, Captain?" Her voice carried the weight of experience. "How they can blind even trained observers to what's right in front of them." She patted Thunder's neck, feeling the controlled power in his muscles. "You assumed I was just another widow. Webb assumed Thunder was just another horse. And now you're assuming you have us trapped." Movement at the barn's entrance. Shadows approaching with military precision. But Eleanor and Thunder had positioned themselves exactly where they needed to be, just as they had so many times before. "Last chance, Catherine," the captain called out, dropping all pretense. "Surrender the horse and we can discuss terms." Eleanor, or Catherine as she had once been known, shared another look with Thunder. Years of partnership had made words unnecessary. They both knew what came next. "Actually," she replied, her voice carrying the same calm certainty that had made her legendary during the border wars, "I think it's time for a demonstration of why the 3rd Regiment's war horses were considered worth stealing in the first place." The rain continued to fall as tensions mounted around the barn, but neither Eleanor nor Thunder showed any concern. They had faced worse odds together, survived situations that had become mere whispers around cavalry campfires. Now, in this quiet valley, they prepared to remind these men why Swift Cathy's name had once been spoken with equal measures of awe and fear. A whistle cut through the rain, a signal any cavalry officer would recognize as a command to advance. But before the men could act, Thunder demonstrated exactly why he'd been the pride of the 3rd Regiment. The stallion's body tensed, then moved with explosive power, pivoting in the confined space of the barn with impossible precision. A remarkable thing about war horses, Eleanor noted, as Thunder's maneuver placed them in perfect position relative to both entrances. Most people focus on their combat training, their ability to handle gunfire and charges. But the truly elite mounts learned something far more valuable: how to control the flow of battle itself. Through the gaps in the barn walls, she could see the men adjusting their positions, trying to compensate for Thunder's unexpected movement. Their horses shifted uneasily, sensing something their riders had yet to fully grasp. "You see, Captain," she continued, her hands moving to another hidden compartment in Thunder's modified tack, "during the border wars, we discovered something interesting. A horse that understands tactical positioning can change the entire dynamic of a fight. They become more than just mounts. They become partners in strategy." The captain's laugh carried forced bravado. "Pretty words, Catherine, but you're still outnumbered and cornered." "Am I?" Her fingers found what they sought, a mechanism that had taken months to perfect. "You know what the most crucial lesson was training horses for the 3rd Regiment? Teaching them to understand the difference between being surrounded and being in position." Thunder's ears flicked forward as booted feet approached both entrances. The stallion's body shifted slightly, anticipating what would come next. Years of partnership had honed their timing to perfection. "Last warning," the captain called out. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Eleanor smiled, though none of the men could see it. "You know what your predecessor said the night of the stable fire? Almost exactly the same words. He didn't understand either. About Thunder, about me, about why some secrets are worth protecting." A sudden movement at both entrances, men rushing in with military precision. But Eleanor and Thunder were already in motion. The mechanism she'd activated dropped heavy wooden bars across both doorways, while Thunder's perfectly timed pivot sent a cascade of equipment crashing toward their would-be captors. "That's the thing about assumptions, gentlemen," Eleanor called out as chaos erupted. "They can be deadly." Thunder reared, his massive form blocking the remaining light from the barn's entrance. To the men scrambling backward, he must have looked like something out of legend, a warhorse at full extension, his training evident in every line of his powerful body. "I think it's time we had an honest discussion," Eleanor announced, her voice carrying the authority that had once commanded the 3rd Regiment's most elite training program. "About who you really are, about why you're so interested in Thunder, and about what happened to those missing weapons shipments during the border wars." The rain continued to fall as the situation around the barn shifted from a simple confrontation into something far more complex. Eleanor Miller, once known as Catherine Swift Cathy Reynolds, prepared to remind these men why the 3rd Regiment's training program had been considered worth stealing, and why some legends are better left undisturbed. Thunder's hooves struck the barn floor with deliberate force, sending vibrations through the wooden planks that made the men retreat further. This wasn't just a display of power, it was a demonstration of control, of partnership between rider and mount that went beyond mere training. "You have 2 choices now," Eleanor declared, each word carrying the weight of experience. "We can discuss this like reasonable people, or Thunder can show you exactly why he was considered the finest warhorse ever produced by the 3rd Regiment's program." The captain's voice carried a new note of uncertainty. "Even you can't take on 6 armed men, Catherine, not even with that horse, really." The smile in her voice made several men step back involuntarily. "Care to wager your life on that assumption? Because Thunder and we've faced worse odds, haven't we, old friends?" The captain's laugh echoed through the rain-soaked air, but it carried an edge of desperation that belied his apparent confidence. The legendary Swift Cathy, reduced to hiding in some backwater valley. "Times have changed, Catherine. The border wars are over. The 3rd Regiment is disbanded. Your precious training program is nothing but dust and memories. Is that what you think?" Eleanor adjusted her position slightly, one hand resting on Thunder's neck. "Then explain why you're here, Captain Harrison Vale. Yes, I know who you are. Or rather, who you were before they stripped your rank for selling military secrets." Vale's sharp intake of breath confirmed her words. Through the gaps in the barn walls, Eleanor could see his men exchanging uneasy glances. They hadn't known their commander's true identity. "The thing about disgrace," Vale recovered quickly, "is that it forces a man to seek new opportunities, like the chance to acquire a legendary war horse, one that could prove certain theories about the 3rd Regiment's training methods." Thunder's muscles tensed beneath Eleanor's hand. The stallion remembered Vale, though the captain didn't know it. He'd been present during the early stages of the training program, before greed and ambition revealed his true nature. "You're working for Blackwood," Eleanor stated flatly. "He's still trying to recreate the program, isn't he, even after all these years?" Vale's silence was confirmation enough. Sebastian Blackwood, weapons dealer, former military contractor, and the man ultimately responsible for the stable fire that had forced Eleanor and Thunder to disappear. His obsession with the 3rd Regiment's elite mounts had turned from professional interest to dangerous fixation. "Blackwood understands the potential," Vale finally responded. "One properly trained warhorse could be worth a fortune to the right buyer, but a method to create more, to build an entire stable of elite mounts that would change the balance of power across the territories." Rain drummed against the barn's roof as Eleanor processed this revelation. "So that's why you're really here, not just to capture Thunder, but to take me as well, to force me to reveal the training methods." "They said you were clever." Vale's voice carried grudging admiration. "Though not clever enough to see the bigger picture. Blackwood doesn't just want to recreate the program, he wants to perfect it. Imagine an army of horses like your Thunder, each one capable of turning the tide of battle. The territories would have no choice but to pay whatever price he demanded." Eleanor's laugh held no humor. "You actually believe that's possible? That you can mass-produce what thunder represents? Her hand moved to a particular scar on the stallions. In flank, this mark he got it saving my life during the border wars, not because of training, but because of trust, because we chose to fight for each other. That's what none of you ever understood about the program. Pretty sentiments, Vale. Dismissed, but irrelevant. Blackwood has resources you can't imagine, facilities built specifically for this purpose. Scientists are studying every aspect of equine behavior. With your knowledge, we could create an abomination, Eleanor cut him off. Turn living creatures into weapons without souls, just like you tried to do before the fire. Movement outside. Vale's men adjusting their positions again, but with less confidence now. The revelation of their commander's true identity and purpose had shaken them. The fire that you started, Vale's voice hardened, that destroyed years of research and killed good men. Good men? The edge in Eleanor's voice made several horses outside stamp nervously. Like Colonel Richards, the one who ordered horses whipped until they broke, thinking pain would make them stronger? Or Lieutenant Mason, who wanted to use poison gas to test their endurance? Thunder's ears flattened at the memories. He had witnessed those experiments, had seen what happened to horses that failed to meet Blackwood's impossible standards. That was necessary research, Vale insisted, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. It was torture, Eleanor corrected, and it proved what I'd been trying to tell them from the start. You can't force this kind of partnership. It has to be earned, built on mutual trust and respect. Thunder isn't just a weapon to be replicated. He's a partner who chooses to fight alongside me. Rain continued to fall as tension mounted around the barn. Vale's men had spread out, taking positions that suggested they still planned to attempt a capture. They didn't understand that every movement, every shift in position, was being tracked by both horse and rider. You know what's fascinating? Eleanor continued, her hands moving to another hidden catch in Thunder's tack. How men like Blackwood always make the same mistake. They see the physical attributes, the speed, the strength, the combat capabilities, but they miss the most important element. And what's that? Vale's tone carried mockery, but also curiosity. The choice. Eleanor's voice softened. Every time Thunder goes into battle, he chooses to fight. Not because of training or conditioning, but because we trust each other completely. That's what makes him unique, what makes all the 3rd Regiment's elite mounts special. They weren't just trained, they were partners. Vale's laugh carried genuine amusement. You expect me to believe that? That some mystical bond between horse and rider is more important than proper conditioning and training? I expect you to remember what happened the last time someone underestimated that bond, Eleanor replied. The night of the fire, when Thunder and I escaped. How many men did Blackwood lose trying to stop us? How many of his precious conditioned horses broke ranks and fled when faced with a true war mount? Silence fell, broken only by the steady drumming of rain. Vale's men shifted uneasily, sensing the growing tension between their commander and the woman they'd come to capture. That's ancient history, Vale dismissed, but his voice carried an edge of concern. Times have changed. Blackwood's methods have improved. He has backing from people who understand the true value of what we're creating. You mean the weapons smugglers? Eleanor's question made Vale pause. The same ones who tried to buy the 3rd Regiment's horses during the border wars? I recognized their signature in the recent raids. The same tactics, the same patterns. Blackwood's still working with them, isn't he? Thunder's ears flicked forward as more movement caught his attention. Through the gaps in the barn walls, Eleanor could see riders approaching from the east. Reinforcements Vale had held in reserve. You're still well informed for someone hiding in a backwater, Vale noted, which makes me wonder what else you've been doing these past years. What other secrets you've been keeping besides training methods?" Eleanor's smile was hidden by the barn's shadows. "Careful, Captain. You're asking questions that got better men than you killed during the border wars." "Perhaps," Vale's voice hardened. "But those men didn't have what I have. Leverage. You're surrounded, outnumbered, and out of options. Blackwood wants you alive, but he didn't specify in what condition." "Interesting threat," Eleanor responded, her fingers finding another hidden mechanism in Thunder's tack, "though it suggests you haven't really studied what happened to the last group that tried to capture us. Tell me, Vale, did Blackwood share those reports with you about the night at Broken Ridge?" A subtle shift in the atmosphere. Several of Vale's men recognized the reference. The battle at Broken Ridge had become almost mythical among cavalry units, though few knew the true story. 7 elite cavalry units, Eleanor continued, her voice carrying across the rain-soaked yard. Specialized troops with years of experience. They thought numbers and planning would be enough. Want to know how many walked away? "Propaganda," Vale snapped, but his voice wavered slightly. "Stories to build the legend of Swift Cathy and her warhorse. Then why are your hands shaking, Captain?" The observation cut through the tension like a knife. "Because you were there, weren't you? Not in the main force, no, you were with the reserve unit, watching from the ridge. You saw what one properly trained warhorse could do when pushed too far." Thunder's muscles rippled beneath her touch, remembering. The stallion's breath came steady and controlled, but his ears remained focused on the approaching reinforcements. "From the east." "That was different," Vale insisted. "You had support from the 3rd Regiment, backup plans." "I had Thunder," Eleanor corrected. "And something you and Blackwood never understood. The bond between a true warhorse and its chosen rider isn't just about training or conditioning. It's about absolute trust, about knowing that when everything goes wrong, you'll fight for each other without hesitation." More movement outside. Vale's men adjusting their positions again, but with growing uncertainty. The rain had intensified, reducing visibility and making their horses increasingly nervous. "Pretty speeches won't change your situation," Vale declared, though his earlier confidence had eroded. "Blackwood's facilities are different now, better equipped. With the right persuasion, you'll help us recreate the program. Thunder will be the template for a new generation of war horses." Eleanor's laugh carried genuine amusement. "You still think this is about training methods? That Thunder's abilities can be replicated in some facility?" Her hand moved to another hidden catch in the saddle. "Tell me something, Vale. In all your planning, did you ever wonder why none of Blackwood's previous attempts succeeded? Why did every horse he tried to condition either broke or went mad?" Silence fell, heavy with unspoken truths. Even the rain seemed to quiet, as if nature itself waited for the revelation. "Because they lacked something essential," Vale finally responded, his voice carrying frustrated acknowledgement. "A quality we could never quite identify or reproduce. They lacked choice," Eleanor stated flatly. "The freedom to decide whether to fight or flee. Every horse you tortured, every animal you tried to condition, they were prisoners. But Thunder and the other 3rd Regiment mounts, they chose their riders, choose to fight. That's what made them special." A horse screamed in the distance. One of Vale's reinforcements had pushed too hard in the worsening weather. The sound made several of the nearby mounts stamp nervously, but Thunder remained perfectly still, waiting. "Blackwood's obsession has blinded him," Eleanor continued. "He thinks he can force this kind of partnership, create it through pain and conditioning. But all he's doing is destroying good horses and good men, just like he did during the border wars." Vale's response was cut off by another sound, hooves approaching at a gallop from the west, not his reinforcements. These riders moved differently, with a purpose that made Thunder's ears prick forward in recognition. "More surprises, Catherine?" Vale's voice carried both anger and worry. How long have you been planning this? You assume I'm the one who planned. It, Eleanor replied, her hands never leaving Thunder's neck. That's always been your weakness, Vale, thinking you can control everything. Some things can't be controlled. They can only be understood. Thunder taught me that, during the border wars, a lesson you and Blackwood never learned. The approaching riders drew closer, their pattern of movement suggesting military training, real training, not the false discipline Vale's men displayed. Through gaps in the barn wall, Eleanor could see her would-be captors shifting uneasily, sensing the change in situation. "Last chance, Captain," Eleanor announced, her voice carrying absolute certainty. "Surrender now. Explain to Marshal Bennett why you're impersonating cavalry officers, and maybe you'll avoid the fate of your previous companions at Broken Ridge." The name dropped into the rain-soaked silence like a thunderbolt. Marshal Bennett was legendary among frontier law enforcement, a man who had spent years tracking weapons smugglers and corrupt military officials. His arrival would change everything. Vale's curse carried genuine fear. "You're bluffing. Bennett's operation is 3 territories away." "Is it?" Eleanor's question hung in the air as the sound of approaching riders grew stronger. "Or has he been watching Blackwood's operation all along, waiting for you to make exactly this mistake?" A crash of thunder emphasized the worsening storm as Eleanor's fingers moved across Thunder's modified tack, activating mechanisms that had remained hidden for years. The barn's interior, which had seemed simple at first glance, began revealing its true nature. "Fascinating thing about preparation," she addressed Vale's increasingly nervous men. "Most people focus on weapons, on obvious defenses. They forget that true security lies in the details others overlook." Her hands found another catch, and panels in the barn walls shifted silently, changing sightlines and creating new defensive positions. Vale's sharp intake of breath suggested he'd noticed the transformation. "You've been planning this. All of it. The isolated location, the seemingly vulnerable setup." 5 years, Eleanor confirmed, her voice carrying calm certainty. 5 years studying the valley's patterns, modifying this barn, preparing for the day when Blackwood's obsession would inevitably lead him here. Thunder shifted beneath her touch, positioning himself perfectly as hidden shutters in the roof opened, letting in streams of rain-filtered light that illuminated specific areas while leaving others in shadow. Through gaps in the walls, she could see Vale's men struggling to maintain their positions as their horses grew increasingly nervous. The approaching riders from the west had changed formation, suggesting coordinated movement that spoke of serious military training. "The wood for these walls," Eleanor continued, her hands never still, "came from the old fortress near Copper Creek, specially treated lumber that dampens sound and deflects bullets, the same material we used in the 3rd Regiment's training facilities before Blackwood corrupted the program." Vale cursed softly as understanding dawned. "The supply raids last summer, when those lumber shipments went missing, that was you." Among other things, Eleanor's smile remained hidden in the shadows. "Tell me, did Blackwood ever figure out why his new conditioning facility burned 3 months ago, or why his prized stallions somehow found their way to sanctuaries across the territory?" Movement outside, Vale's reinforcements from the east had arrived, but they faced an unexpected challenge. The seemingly open ground around the barn had been subtly modified over years of careful work. Small changes in elevation, strategic placement of rocks and vegetation, all designed to control mounted movement in ways only an experienced cavalry officer would recognize. "Every fence post," Eleanor explained, as Vale's men discovered their tactical disadvantage, "every tree, every seemingly random feature of this valley, all positioned to create specific approaches while denying others. Thunder helped design it. War horses understand terrain in ways most humans never grasp." The stallion's ears flicked forward as more riders approached from the west. The sound of their movement carried clear purpose now. Not just trained soldiers, but experienced cavalry units who knew how to use rain and poor visibility to their advantage. Marshal Bennett's men? Vale realized aloud, his voice carrying growing desperation. But how did they know? You really should have studied those supply raid reports more carefully, Eleanor interrupted. Particularly the patterns, the timing. A good marshal understands that sometimes the best way to catch smugglers is to let them think they're succeeding. Thunder's muscles tensed beneath her touch as Vale's men tried to reposition, only to find themselves naturally channeled into predetermined zones. The barn's modified interior now controlled every possible angle of attack, while offering Eleanor and Thunder multiple routes of movement. The thing about proper preparation, she continued, activating another hidden mechanism that caused several of Vale's men to curse in surprise, as previously solid ground proved treacherous beneath their horses' hooves, is that it requires patience, the willingness to spend years building something that looks completely innocent to outside observers. Vale's laugh carried an edge of hysteria. All this time, the quiet widow act, the isolated ranch, it was never about hiding. You were setting a trap. Not exactly. Eleanor's voice hardened. It was about creating a choice. For you, for Blackwood, for anyone who thought they could force their will on creatures that deserve better. The same choice I offered during the border wars, before greed and cruelty corrupted everything we'd built. Thunder's ears tracked the approaching riders as they split into two groups, executing a classic cavalry pincer movement. Through the rain, Eleanor could hear Vale's reinforcements, discovering more of the valley's carefully planned obstacles. You see, Captain, she continued, her hands moving to another set of hidden controls, while you and Blackwood spent years trying to recreate the 3rd Regiment's program through force, I was proving what I'd argued from the start, that true. Partnership can't be compelled. It has to be earned. The barn's interior had transformed completely now, revealing its true nature as a defensive position 5 years in the making. Every board, every beam, every seemingly decorative feature served multiple purposes, all designed around the unique capabilities of a true warhorse and his chosen rider. That's why your conditioning methods keep failing, Eleanor explained, as more of Vale's men found themselves in increasingly untenable positions. You try to break the horse's will, to force obedience through pain and fear. But a warhorse without will, without the choice to fight or flee, is just another mount. What made the 3rd Regiment special was that our horses chose to fight alongside us. Thunder's muscles coiled beneath her touch as another group of riders appeared from the north. More of Bennett's men, moving with practiced coordination that made Vale's troops look amateurish in comparison. "Last chance, Vale," Eleanor announced, her voice carrying over the storm. "Surrender now, or discover exactly why Thunder and I spent 5 years preparing this valley. Why we chose this specific location, this precise terrain. Why every feature you thought would work to your advantage was designed to ensure your failure." The rain intensified as tension mounted around the barn. Vale's men found themselves caught between approaching law enforcement and a defensive position they drastically underestimated. Their commander's face showed the dawning realization that he'd led them into something far more complex than a simple capture mission. "You don't understand," Vale tried one last time, his voice betraying growing fear. "Blackwood's influence reaches higher than you know. Even Bennett can't protect you from what?" Eleanor's question cut through the rain. "From the same network of corruption we exposed during the border wars. The one that's been watching you, tracking every movement, gathering evidence for the past 5 years. Her laugh carried genuine amusement. "Did you really think I chose this valley by accident? That Marshal Bennett's nearest outpost just happened to be within riding distance?" Thunder's ears flicked forward as more of Bennett's men appeared through the storm. their movements suggesting they'd surrounded the entire area. Vale's reinforcements, trying to retreat, discovered that the very terrain features that had seemed to offer tactical advantages now served to contain them. "Everything about this place," Eleanor continued, her hands never leaving Thunder's neck, "from the barn's construction to the valley's layout, was designed for one purpose: to give men like you a choice. The same choice I offered during the border wars, before the fire, before Blackwood's obsession destroyed everything we'd built." The storm's intensity matched the growing tension as Vale's men realized the full extent of their predicament. They'd come expecting to find an isolated widow and a valuable horse. Instead, they'd walked into a carefully prepared position held by a legendary cavalry trainer and her warhorse, backed by federal marshals who'd been waiting for exactly this opportunity. "So choose, Captain." Eleanor's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Choose better than you did at Broken Ridge, better than when you helped Blackwood corrupt the program, because this time there won't be another chance." Through strategic gaps in the barn walls, Eleanor watched Vale's men, discovering more of her carefully planned defenses. Each passing moment revealed new aspects of the valley's transformation from simple ranch to tactical stronghold. "Tell me." "Something, Captain," she called out, her hands working another mechanism that caused previously solid sections of the barn's interior to shift silently. "In all your intelligence gathering, did you ever wonder why I chose a property with an abandoned silver mine beneath it?" Vale's sharp curse suggested he hadn't considered this detail. The ground rumbled slightly as Eleanor activated another system, and several of his men's horses nearly lost their footing on suddenly unstable terrain. 5 years of careful work," she explained, watching their growing unease. "Reinforcing tunnels, creating strategic weak points, ensuring the entire valley could become a tactical advantage at a moment's notice." Thunder's previous experience with underground operations proved invaluable. The stallion's ears flicked at the mention of those missions, classified operations during the border wars that had never made official reports. His muscles tensed as more vibrations traveled through the ground, evidence of Eleanor's extensive modifications to the land itself. The mining company's records showed this valley was honeycombed with tunnels, she continued, her voice carrying easily despite the storm. "Most considered it worthless after the silver ran out, but to someone with military engineering experience, with knowledge of cavalry tactics, a ready-made network of underground routes," Vale finished, realization dawning in his voice. "Control points that could destabilize specific areas while leaving others secure." Precisely. Eleanor's hands found another hidden control, and the sound of rushing water joined the storm's fury. The underground stream that once served the mine, redirected, contained, but ready to be released strategically, rather like the flood that trapped Blackwood's men in Red Rock Canyon last spring. More of Bennett's forces appeared through the rain, their positioning suggesting intimate knowledge of the valley's hidden strengths and hazards. Vale's reinforcements, attempting to establish defensive positions, found themselves naturally channeled into increasingly vulnerable locations. "You see, Captain," Eleanor explained as another section of ground became treacherous beneath the raiders' horses. "True preparation isn't just about building defenses. It's about understanding how your opponent thinks, anticipating their responses, and ensuring every choice leads exactly where you want it to." Thunder's muscles coiled as he tracked the movement of Vale's increasingly nervous men. The stallion's training allowed him to sense subtle shifts in the ground that warned of activated mechanisms, of terrain about to transform from solid to unstable. The barn's modified structure, the strategic placement of every tree and rock, even the seemingly random patterns of grass and wildflowers, all designed to control mounted movement, Eleanor continued. "A cavalry officer's worst nightmare, terrain that looks perfectly normal until the moment it isn't." Vale's laugh carried a note of grudging admiration mixed with fear. No wonder Blackwood's been obsessed with recapturing you. This goes beyond military training or horse conditioning. You've turned an entire valley into a weapon. Not a weapon, Eleanor corrected, her voice hardening. A choice. Every feature, every modification, every carefully planned detail serves one purpose: to demonstrate the futility of trying to take by force what can only be freely given. The storm's intensity matched the growing tension as more of Bennett's men moved into position. Through gaps in the barn walls, Eleanor could see Vale's forces realizing the full extent of their tactical disadvantage. Their mounts, already nervous, from Thunder's presence, grew increasingly unsettled as the ground shifted beneath them. "Consider the implications, Captain," she suggested as another hidden mechanism activated, causing several of his men to curse as their planned escape route suddenly became impassable. "Everything you thought would work to your advantage, the isolated location, the apparent vulnerability, even the storm itself, all carefully chosen and prepared over years of patient work." Thunder's ears tracked multiple sources of movement now. Vale's men trying to maintain their positions, Bennett's forces executing coordinated containment maneuvers, and the subtle vibrations of Eleanor's underground modifications continuing. Their work. The truly remarkable thing, she noted, her hands never leaving Thunder's neck, is how few people questioned a widow's decision to buy this particular property, to spend years modifying an old barn, to study weather patterns and terrain features with military precision. Vale's response was cut off by another rumble from beneath the valley floor. More of his men found their horses refusing to advance, instinct warning the animals away from areas that human eyes saw as perfectly solid ground. "Your problem, like Blackwood's, is tunnel vision," Eleanor explained, as the tactical situation continued to deteriorate for the raiders. "You focus so intently on your goal, capturing a legendary warhorse, recreating the 3rd Regiment's program, that you miss the larger pattern, the same mistake you made during the border wars." Thunder's muscles tensed as another group of Bennett's men appeared through the storm, their movement suggesting they'd completed their encirclement. Vale's reinforcements, attempting to regroup, discovered that the very features they'd planned to use for cover now served to trap them. "Did you ever wonder," Eleanor asked, her voice carrying over the rain, "why none of your previous attempts to recreate the program succeeded? Why did every facility Blackwood built, every method he tried, produce nothing but broken horses and failed results?" The storm's fury seemed to emphasize her words as more of Vale's men found themselves forced into increasingly untenable positions. The valley itself appeared to be working against them, using their own tactical assumptions to guide them into carefully prepared zones of disadvantage. "Because you can't force this kind of partnership," she continued, activating another sequence of mechanisms that caused several of Vale's planned fallback positions to become suddenly unusable. "You can't create it through conditioning or coercion. What Thunder and I have, what all the 3rd Regiment's elite partnerships had, comes from choice, from trust earned through years of working together." The rain continued to fall as Bennett's forces tightened their containment. Vale's men, their confidence shattered by the valley's unexpected transformation, looked to their commander with growing uncertainty. They'd come expecting an easy capture mission. Instead, they'd walked into a masterpiece of tactical preparation, where every aspect of the terrain had been carefully modified to serve a specific purpose. "So choose, Captain," Eleanor announced, her hands moving to Thunder's saddle as the barn's interior completed its transformation from simple shelter to strategic stronghold. "Choose to understand why this valley, this position, this precise moment was selected. Why every feature you thought would grant you advantage was designed to demonstrate the fundamental truth you and Blackwood never grasped." The storm's intensity perfectly matched the growing realization on Vale's face as he finally understood the full scope of what he'd walked into. This wasn't just a defensive position. It was a statement, a demonstration of why the 3rd Regiment's program could never be recreated through force alone. Marshal Bennett didn't just happen to be nearby, Eleanor revealed, her voice cutting through the storm's fury. His forces didn't simply stumble upon Blackwood's operation. Every raid, every mysterious incident that plagued your weapon shipments and horse conditioning facilities, all carefully orchestrated to lead to this moment. Thunder's ears pivoted as more of Bennett's men secured their positions. The stallion's body language communicated volumes to those who understood warhorse training. This was no simple mount responding to commands, but a tactical partner aware of every nuance of the developing situation. The valley's natural features provided the foundation, Eleanor explained, while Vale's men discovered yet another planned escape route transformed into a tactical disadvantage. The old mining tunnels offered structure, but it was Thunder's understanding of mounted combat that shaped the final design. Vale's face showed dawning comprehension as another section of seemingly solid ground proved treacherous for his forces. The elevation changes, the subtle grade variations, they're all based on cavalry movement patterns. Precisely. Eleanor's hands found another concealed mechanism. Every slope, every depression, even the patterns of rock outcroppings, all positioned to take advantage of how mounted units naturally respond under pressure. The same principles we taught in the 3rd Regiment turned into a comprehensive defensive system. The storm's intensity increased as Bennett's forces continued their methodical containment. Vale's reinforcements, attempting to maintain tactical cohesion, found themselves separated by terrain features that seemed to anticipate their every move. Consider the implications, Eleanor suggested, as more of her carefully planned modifications revealed themselves. 5 years studying weather patterns, analyzing seasonal changes, understanding how rain and wind affect mounted operations in this specific terrain. Thunder's experience proved invaluable. Warhorses understand these dynamics instinctively. Vale's nervous laugh carried over the rain. You turned meteorology into a weapon. The storm, you knew it was coming. Planned for it. Weather is just another tactical element, Eleanor confirmed, while activating sequences that transformed more of the valley's familiar features into strategic challenges. Like the creek that feeds the old mining operation, its flow patterns change predictably with rainfall, affecting ground stability in ways only experienced cavalry officers would recognize. Thunder's muscles rippled as he tracked multiple threats through the barn's modified structure. His training allowed him to interpret subtle vibrations that warned of activated mechanisms, of terrain about to shift from advantageous to hazardous. For mounted units, the barn's design incorporates principles from frontier fortifications, Eleanor continued, as more of Vale's men found their tactical options diminishing. Modified using insights gained during the border wars. Every beam, every support, every seemingly decorative element serves multiple functions. Bennett's forces executed another coordinated movement, demonstrating intimate familiarity with the valley's hidden strengths and vulnerabilities. Vale's remaining men, their confidence shattered, watched as their planned positions became increasingly untenable. But the true masterpiece, Eleanor noted while thunder crashed overhead, isn't in the physical preparations. It's in understanding human nature, how mounted units react under pressure, how tactical assumptions can become fatal weaknesses when terrain itself becomes an active opponent. Vale's curse carried genuine fear as another section of the valley revealed its true nature. The supply raids, the mysterious accidents at Blackwood's facilities, they weren't just sabotage. You were studying our responses, learning our patterns. Every incident provided valuable information, Eleanor confirmed. How your men move under pressure, their preferred tactics, their fallback tendencies. Thunder's ability to read mounted units proved especially useful in designing containment zones. The storm's fury perfectly complemented the tactical situation as more of Bennett's forces secured their positions. Vale's men, their options systematically eliminated by Eleanor's preparations, faced the growing realization that they'd ridden into something far more sophisticated than a simple ambush. The valley's design includes elements from every major cavalry engagement of the border wars, she explained, while activating another sequence of defensive measures. Terrain features that proved effective at Crystal Ridge, weather considerations from the Battle of Broken Pass, even psychological factors observed during the campaign against weapons smugglers. Thunder's ears tracked the movement of Vale's increasingly desperate men as they discovered more of their planned extraction routes compromised. The stallion's body language communicated readiness without tension, the collected power of a war horse confident in its tactical position. Each modification, each carefully planned detail, Eleanor continued, serves to demonstrate why force and coercion can never replicate what the 3rd Regiment achieved. True partnership, genuine trust between horse and rider, can't be manufactured in some facility or conditioned through pain. The rain intensified as Bennett's forces completed their encirclement. Vale's remaining options diminished with each passing moment as the valley's true nature continued to unfold, transforming familiar terrain into an intricate system of tactical disadvantages for mounted units. "So make your choice, Captain," Eleanor announced as thunder punctuated her words. "Choose to understand why this location, this moment, this precise tactical situation was arranged. Why every element you thought would grant advantage was designed to prove the fundamental truth about war horses and the soldiers who ride them." The storm's fury matched the growing comprehension on Vale's face as he finally grasped the full scope of what he'd encountered. This wasn't merely a defensive position or a tactical trap. It was a demonstration, a carefully orchestrated lesson about the true nature of the partnership between a war horse and its chosen rider. The storm's intensity perfectly matched the growing tension as Eleanor's hands moved across Thunder's neck, each touch carrying years of shared history. "You know, Captain," she addressed Vale through the rain-soaked air, "before you and Blackwood corrupted everything, the 3rd Regiment's training program began with a simple truth. The best partnerships are forged in moments of choice." Through gaps in the barn's modified walls, she could see Bennett's forces continuing their methodical containment. Vale's men, their tactical options systematically eliminated, listened with growing unease as she continued. "Summer of '65, Eleanor recalled, her voice carrying over the storm. The 4th Cavalry had just suffered devastating losses along the border. Conventional mounts proved inadequate against the weapons smugglers' new tactics. That's when Colonel Matthews proposed something revolutionary. Thunder's ears flicked at the name, remembering. The stallion had been among the first horses selected for the experimental program, though none of Vale's men knew the full story of his recruitment. Matthews understood something fundamental about cavalry operations, Eleanor explained, while activating another sequence of defensive measures. Traditional military training treated horses as tools, equipment to be utilized. He envisioned something different, genuine partnerships between mount and rider, each choosing to fight alongside the other. Vale's laugh carried bitter recognition. Matthews, the idealist who thought horses could be more than weapons. Blackwood had him removed from command when the program's true potential became clear. Did he? Eleanor's question hung in the rain-soaked air. Or did Matthews simply disappear, along with key elements of the training program, when he realized what Blackwood planned to do with his research? The implication caused several of Vale's men to exchange uneasy glances. Colonel Matthews's fate had become something of a legend in military circles, though few knew the truth. The initial trials exceeded all expectations, Eleanor continued, while Thunder's muscles tensed beneath her touch. Horses demonstrated capabilities that defied conventional understanding, not just improved combat performance, but genuine tactical awareness, the ability to read battlefield situations, anticipate threats, coordinate with their chosen riders. Bennett's forces executed another perfectly timed maneuver, forcing more of Vale's men into increasingly compromised positions. The valley's carefully prepared terrain features continued revealing new aspects of Eleanor's defensive system. Thunder was different from the start, she noted, as the stallion's ears tracked multiple threats through the storm. Most horses showed aptitude for specific aspects of the training, combat maneuvers, tactical positioning, threat assessment, but he grasped everything instinctively, as if he'd been waiting for the opportunity to prove what horses could truly achieve. Vale's face showed growing comprehension as another section of the valley demonstrated its hidden tactical advantages. That's why Blackwood's been obsessed with recapturing him specifically. Thunder wasn't just part of the program, he was its greatest success. Success. Eleanor's laugh held no humor. Is that what Blackwood told you? That Thunder represented the program's achievement? Her hands found another concealed mechanism in the barn's structure. No, Captain. Thunder represented something far more dangerous to men like Blackwood, proof that their entire approach to military horse training was fundamentally flawed. The storm's fury seemed to emphasize her words as more of Vale's planned escape routes. Proved compromised, their mounts, already unsettled by Thunder's presence, grew increasingly agitated as the ground shifted beneath them. You see, Matthews's original vision wasn't about creating weapon systems or tactical assets, Eleanor explained, while Bennett's forces tightened their containment. It was about understanding the true potential of the relationship between horse and rider, about recognizing that genuine partnership, freely chosen by both parties, would always prove superior to forced compliance or conditioned responses. Thunder's muscles coiled as he tracked the movement of Vale's increasingly desperate men. His body language communicated volumes to those who understood warhorse behavior. This wasn't merely trained response, but conscious tactical assessment. The breakthrough came during an unexpected skirmish, Eleanor continued, her voice carrying over the rain. A routine patrol encountered smugglers using experimental weapons. Conventional cavalry tactics proved useless against their new artillery. But Thunder? She paused, remembering. Thunder demonstrated something extraordinary. Vale's men listened with growing attention as she described what happened next. Without orders, without training for that specific situation, he coordinated with 3 other program horses to execute a perfect flanking maneuver. They didn't just react to commands. They anticipated their riders' intentions, adapted to changing tactical conditions, and chose to engage in ways that maximized their natural abilities. The storm's intensity matched the growing tension as Eleanor revealed more of their shared history. That's when everything changed. Blackwood, who'd seen the program as merely another military asset, suddenly understood its true potential. But he drew exactly the wrong conclusions from what he'd witnessed. Bennett's forces continued their methodical encirclement, while Vale's men discovered more of their tactical options, eliminated by Eleanor's careful preparations. The valley itself seemed to work against them, using their own military training to guide them into increasingly untenable positions. Blackwood believed he'd seen proof that horses could be transformed into living weapons, she explained, while Thunder's ears tracked multiple threats through the modified barn structure. He thought with proper conditioning, with enough force and coercion, he could mass-produce what Thunder and the other program horses had demonstrated. Vale's curse carried genuine understanding. That's why the program split, why Matthews disappeared with key research elements. He knew what Blackwood planned to do. Precisely. Eleanor's hands moved to another hidden mechanism. But Blackwood's obsession blinded him to the fundamental truth. You can't force this kind of partnership. Every attempt to replicate Thunder's capabilities through conditioning or coercion produced exactly the same result: broken horses, failed trials, and mounting casualties. The rain continued falling as she revealed more of their past. The night. Matthews disappeared, taking crucial elements of the research with him. Blackwood showed his true nature. He ordered immediate implementation of his enhanced conditioning protocols. Horses that had demonstrated remarkable abilities under Matthews' guidance were subjected to increasingly brutal training methods. Thunder's muscles tensed at the memory, but his posture remained perfectly controlled. Eleanor's touch conveyed volumes to those who understood the depth of their partnership. Not just reassurance, but shared purpose. "What you never knew, Captain," she continued, while Bennett's forces secured another section of the valley, was that Matthews didn't just disappear with research documents. He took something far more valuable: understanding of why the program succeeded and why Blackwood's methods would inevitably fail. Vale's face showed dawning comprehension as more of his tactical options proved compromised by Eleanor's preparations. The conditioning facilities, the specialized training methods we've spent years developing, they were never going to work, were they? "Never," Eleanor confirmed while thunder crashed overhead. "Because you can't force what must be freely given. You can't replicate through coercion what only comes from genuine trust and mutual choice." That's what Matthews understood, what Thunder demonstrated, and what Blackwood's obsession would never let him accept. The storm's fury perfectly complemented the tactical situation as she revealed more of their history. Vale's men, their military, training proving increasingly useless against Eleanor's defensive system, listened with growing understanding to the true story of the 3rd Regiment's legendary program. "But here's what fascinates me, Captain," Eleanor noted while activating another sequence of hidden mechanisms. "In all your years working with Blackwood, studying reports from the original program, trying to recreate what Thunder represents, did you ever wonder why certain documents disappeared? Why did specific training elements prove impossible to replicate?" Vale's silence was answered enough as more of his planned positions became untenable. The valley's carefully prepared features continued demonstrating why force and coercion could never achieve what genuine partnership had accomplished. "Because Matthews didn't just take research papers that night," Eleanor explained, as Bennett's forces completed another phase of their containment strategy. "He took something far more crucial: proof that the program's success had nothing to do with conditioning methods or specialized training techniques." Thunder's ears tracked multiple sources of movement while she continued revealing their shared past. The stallion's body language communicated complete confidence in their tactical position, born from years of genuine partnership rather than forced compliance. "The true secret," Eleanor announced while the storm raged around them, "was understanding that horses like Thunder choose their riders. They choose to fight, to protect, to engage in combat, not because of training or conditioning, but because they've found partners worthy of their trust and loyalty." Vale's men, their military experience proving inadequate against the valley's defensive features, began to grasp the full implications of what she described. This wasn't just history. It was an explanation of why their current tactical situation had become so hopelessly compromised. "So consider carefully, Captain," Eleanor concluded as Thunder emphasized her words. "Everything you're experiencing now, the valley's defensive systems, Thunder's tactical awareness, even the coordination of Bennett's forces, all of it demonstrates why Blackwood's obsession with force compliance will never succeed. True partnership, genuine trust between horse and rider, can't be coerced or conditioned. It can only be earned, chosen, freely given by both parties." The night Matthews disappeared, Eleanor continued, as another sequence of defensive measures. Activated, he left something else behind, something Blackwood never found, though he tore the regiment's facilities apart, searching for it. Her hands moved across Thunder's neck with practiced precision. The original training journals, documenting every successful partnership, every failed attempt, every insight into why some horses and riders formed extraordinary bonds, while others never progressed beyond basic military capability. Vale's sharp intake of breath suggested he recognized the significance. Through gaps in the barn's modified structure, his men showed growing comprehension of how thoroughly they'd misunderstood the program's true nature. Those journals revealed patterns, Eleanor explained, while Bennett's forces secured another. Tactical position. Specific characteristics shared by every successful partnership. Not physical attributes or training responses, but something far more fundamental. The capacity for mutual trust, for genuine communication between horse and rider. Thunder's ears flicked forward as more vibrations traveled through the valley. You floor. The stallion's posture communicated volumes about the difference between trained response and conscious tactical choice. Take the Battle of Copper Ridge, she noted, while rain continued falling. Traditional military reports focused on the unusual maneuvers executed by program horses, trying to analyze them as combat techniques that could be replicated through training. But Matthews saw something entirely different, moments of genuine cooperation between mount and rider, each adapting to the other's capabilities in real time. Vale's curse carried frustrated recognition. That's why our conditioning methods never produced consistent results. We were trying to force behaviors that only emerged naturally through partnership. Precisely. Eleanor activated another hidden mechanism that caused several of his men's positions to become increasingly unstable. But Blackwood refused to accept this reality. He believed enough force, enough specialized conditioning would eventually break through what he saw as merely psychological barriers. Bennett's forces executed another coordinated movement, demonstrating the difference between military precision and genuine tactical awareness. Vale's remaining men, their training proving inadequate against Eleanor's defensive system, watched with growing unease. The program's early successes came from recognizing individual characteristics, she continued, while Thunder tracked multiple threats through the modified barn structure. Some horses showed natural aptitude for direct combat, others for reconnaissance or tactical coordination. Matthews's genius lay in allowing these tendencies to develop naturally, pairing each mount with riders whose abilities complemented their unique strengths. The storm's intensity matched the gravity of her revelations, as more of Vale's tactical options proved compromised. Their mounts, increasingly agitated by Thunder's presence, communicated through body language what their riders had failed to grasp: the fundamental difference between forced compliance and willing partnership. Thunder's particular gift, Eleanor explained while activating another sequence of terrain modifications, wasn't just combat capability or tactical awareness, though he excelled at both. His true talent lay in understanding the relationship between horse and rider, in demonstrating why trust freely given always proves superior to obedience compelled through force. Vale's men listened with growing attention as she described a particular incident during the border wars. A night operation against weapons smugglers went badly wrong. Traditional cavalry units found themselves caught in carefully prepared kill zones. But Thunder, she paused, sharing a glance with the stallion. Thunder assessed the tactical situation independently, coordinated with other program horses without rider input, and executed a series of maneuvers that completely reversed the engagement. Bennett's forces continued their methodical containment, while Eleanor revealed more of their shared history. That's what terrified Blackwood, though he never admitted it. The realization that horses could develop this level of autonomous tactical capability, could choose to engage or withdraw based on their own assessment of battlefield conditions. Thunder's muscles rippled beneath her touch as she described another crucial moment from their past. The program's most significant breakthrough came during an unexpected cavalry exercise. Traditional military units attempted to simulate combat, conditions complete with artillery fire and explosive charges, but the program horses demonstrated something extraordinary. They didn't just remain calm under fire, they actively analyzed threat patterns and adjusted their tactical positions. Accordingly, Vale's face showed dawning comprehension as more of his planned escape routes proved compromised by Eleanor's careful preparations. That's why Blackwood became obsessed with replicating specific behaviors rather than understanding the underlying principles. He couldn't accept that horses could develop this level of independent tactical awareness. His fundamental mistake, Eleanor confirmed while the storm raged around them, was believing that military efficiency required absolute control. That partnership between horse and rider meant dominance rather than cooperation. Every failed conditioning attempt, every broken horse, every ruined facility simply reinforced his determination to force what could only be freely chosen. Bennett's forces executed another perfectly timed maneuver, demonstrating how genuine tactical cooperation between mount and rider differed from mere military precision. Vale's men, their training proving increasingly inadequate against the valley's defensive features, began to understand why their current situation had become so hopelessly compromised. Matthews's final journal entry, Eleanor revealed while Thunder's ears tracked multiple sources of movement, contained a warning that Blackwood should have heeded. The moment we try to force this bond, to compel through conditioning what must arise naturally through trust, we destroy the very thing that makes these partnerships extraordinary. But Blackwood's obsession with control, with transforming living creatures into predictable weapons, made him blind to this fundamental truth. The rain continued falling as she shared another crucial detail from their shared past. The night everything changed. When Blackwood's enhanced conditioning protocols were first implemented, something remarkable happened. Every single program horse, even those who had demonstrated extraordinary combat capabilities, chose retreat over submission. They recognized instinctively what Blackwood refused to accept, that true partnership cannot exist where choice is denied. Thunder's posture shifted slightly, emphasizing the difference between trained response and conscious tactical decision. Vale's remaining men, their military experience proving inadequate against Eleanor's defensive system, watched with growing comprehension as the stallion demonstrated exactly why force and coercion could never replicate what genuine trust had achieved. "So consider carefully, Captain," Eleanor concluded as Thunder emphasized her words, "why everything you're experiencing now, from the valley's defensive features to Thunder's tactical awareness, serves to demonstrate this essential truth. You can't force what must be freely given. You can't compel through conditioning what only emerges through genuine partnership." That's what Matthews understood, what Thunder proved, and what Blackwood's obsession will never let him accept. The storm's momentary lull ended as Vale made his decision, signaling his men to execute what he thought was a coordinated assault. Their movement suggested military training, but Thunder's ears tracked a fatal flaw in their formation, a gap that exposed their tactical weakness. "Interesting choice," Eleanor noted while her hands moved to Thunder's modified tack. "Though you might want to consider why your men's approach pattern exactly matches the training scenarios we used to design this valley's defensive features." Through gaps in the barn's structure, Bennett's forces maintained their containment positions, waiting. They understood something Vale's men had yet to grasp. This confrontation would demonstrate why genuine partnership between horse and rider transformed conventional military tactics into something extraordinary. Thunder's muscles coiled beneath Eleanor's touch as Vale's men approached, their movements betraying growing uncertainty. The stallion's body language communicated volumes to those who understood war horse behavior. This wasn't merely prepared response, but tactical assessment. "Your first mistake," Eleanor explained while activating another sequence of defensive measures, was assuming traditional cavalry formations would prove effective against a trained warhorse. "Your second," she paused as Thunder shifted his weight precisely, "was forgetting that every approach you considered was anticipated years ago." Vale's curse carried genuine alarm as the ground beneath his men's horses suddenly transformed from solid to treacherous. The valley's carefully prepared terrain features began demonstrating why force and superior numbers meant nothing against proper preparation and genuine tactical awareness. "Notice how your mounts react," Eleanor continued, while Thunder's ears tracked multiple threats. "Their instincts warn them of danger their riders ignore. That's the fundamental difference between trained obedience and true partnership. Understanding when to trust your horse's judgment." Bennett's forces executed another coordinated movement, forcing more of Vale's men into increasingly compromised positions. Their precision demonstrated the difference between military efficiency and genuine tactical cooperation between mount and rider. "Marshal," Eleanor called out as thunder crashed overhead, "I believe Captain Vale's men are about to discover why the 3rd Regiment's training program proved impossible to replicate through force alone." Thunder's muscles tensed as Vale's frustrated lieutenants attempted to rally their scattered units. The stallion's posture communicated complete confidence in their tactical position, born from years of genuine partnership rather than conditioned response. "You see," Eleanor explained while activating another hidden mechanism, "Thunder doesn't just respond to commands or follow tactical protocols. He assesses situations independently, adapts to changing conditions, chooses how best to engage or withdraw based on his own understanding of battlefield dynamics." Vale's remaining men watched in growing alarm as their carefully planned assault deteriorated into chaos. Their mounts, increasingly agitated by Thunder's presence, began refusing commands, instinct overriding training as the valley's defensive features continued revealing new aspects of Eleanor's preparation. "Fascinating thing about proper tactical assessment," she noted, while Thunder's ears tracked multiple sources of movement. "It requires understanding not just your opponent's capabilities, but their psychological tendencies, how they react under pressure, how their training influences their decisions, how their assumptions become vulnerabilities." Bennett's forces maintained their containment while Vale's men discovered more of their planned maneuvers compromised by Eleanor's defensive system. The valley itself seemed to work against them, using their own military experience to guide them into increasingly untenable positions. For instance, Eleanor continued as Thunder shifted his weight again, "Your men's current formation reflects standard cavalry response to uncertain terrain. But notice how that same training makes them predictable, forces them to move exactly where we prepared for them to go." Vale's face showed dawning comprehension as another section of seemingly solid ground proved treacherous for his forces. The valley's defensive features, they're not just physical obstacles, they're psychological tools designed to exploit military training itself. Precisely. Eleanor's hands found another concealed mechanism while Thunder emphasized her words. "Every tactical decision your men make, based on their training and experience, leads them deeper into a situation they can't control. Just like Blackwood's conditioning methods, their rigid adherence to military protocol becomes their greatest weakness." Thunder's muscles coiled as Vale's lieutenants attempted another coordinated advance. The stallion's body language demonstrated exactly why force and superior numbers meant nothing against genuine tactical awareness and proper preparation. "Watch carefully, Captain," Eleanor suggested as Thunder responded to a subtle signal. Notice how he doesn't just react to immediate threats, but anticipates tactical developments. How his movements account for terrain features, weather conditions, and opponent psychology simultaneously. Vale's men cursed as their mounts increasingly resisted commands, sensing danger their riders ignored. The growing chaos demonstrated why traditional military training proved inadequate against a genuine warhorse operating in carefully prepared terrain. Your men's frustration, Eleanor noted while activating another sequence of defensive measures, comes from trying to force compliance from mounts that naturally resist, putting themselves in danger. But Thunder... She paused as the stallion executed a precise tactical adjustment. Thunder chooses his movements based on genuine understanding of the situation. Bennett's forces continued their methodical containment, while Vale's remaining tactical options proved increasingly compromised. The storm's intensity perfectly matched the growing realization among his men that they faced something far more sophisticated than conventional military opposition. Consider this demonstration, Eleanor suggested, as Thunder's ears tracked multiple threats. Every movement your men make based on their training and experience becomes a disadvantage in terrain specifically designed to exploit those same tactical principles. Their military precision, rather than granting advantage, makes them predictable. Vale watched in growing alarm as his carefully planned assault continued deteriorating. The valley's defensive features, combined with Thunder's tactical awareness, transformed standard cavalry maneuvers into vulnerabilities rather than advantages. That's the fundamental difference, Eleanor explained while Thunder crashed overhead. Between forced compliance and genuine partnership, your men try to command their mounts through training and conditioning. But Thunder... She paused as the stallion demonstrated another aspect of his capabilities. Thunder engages as a tactical partner, choosing his responses based on genuine understanding of battlefield dynamics. Bennett's forces executed another coordinated movement, forcing more of Vale's men into increasingly compromised positions. Their precision demonstrated why genuine cooperation between mount and rider proved superior to mere military training. So, observe carefully, Eleanor suggested, as Thunder's muscles tensed beneath her touch. Watch how a true warhorse operates in terrain specifically prepared to complement his capabilities. Notice how each tactical decision your men make, based on their military experience, leads them deeper into a situation they can't control through force alone. Vale's curse carried genuine understanding, as more of his planned positions proved untenable. The valley's carefully prepared features continued demonstrating why traditional cavalry tactics meant nothing against proper preparation and genuine tactical awareness. Your men's training, Eleanor noted, while Thunder tracked multiple sources of movement, teaches them to maintain formation, to execute coordinated maneuvers, to respond to specific tactical situations according to established protocols. But against a genuine warhorse operating in prepared terrain, she paused as another section of ground proved treacherous. Those same protocols become predictable weaknesses. Bennett's forces maintained their containment while Vale's increasingly frustrated lieutenants discovered more of their military experience rendered useless by Eleanor's defensive system. The growing chaos demonstrated exactly why force and superior numbers proved inadequate against genuine partnership between horse and rider. This confrontation, Eleanor announced as Thunder emphasized her words, serves a purpose beyond mere tactical demonstration. It proves why Blackwood's obsession with forced compliance, with controlling through conditioning what can only emerge through trust, will never succeed in recreating what Thunder represents. The storm's intensity matched the growing realization among Vale's men that they faced something far more sophisticated than conventional military opposition. Their mounts' increasing resistance to commands demonstrated why genuine partnership would always prove superior to forced obedience. Remarkable. The thing about tactical advantage, Eleanor observed, as Vale's men discovered another of their planned positions compromised. It's not just about superior position or numerical strength. It's about understanding how your opponent's strengths can become weaknesses in the right circumstances. Thunder's ears pivoted as more of Vale's lieutenants attempted to rally their scattered units. The stallion's movements demonstrated a level of tactical awareness that made several of Bennett's veteran soldiers exchange knowing glances. "Take your current formation," Eleanor suggested, while activating another hidden mechanism. "Standard cavalry response to uncertain terrain, maintain cohesion, establish clear lines of communication, secure tactical positions. But in this valley—" She paused as another section of ground shifted treacherously. "Those same protocols force you into increasingly vulnerable positions." Vale watched in growing frustration as his carefully planned assault continued unraveling. The rain's intensity perfectly matched the mounting tension as his men discovered more of their military training rendered useless by Eleanor's defensive preparations. "Your mounts understand instinctively what their riders ignore," she explained while Thunder shifted his weight with precise calculation. "They sense the difference between natural hazards and deliberately prepared tactical features. Their resistance isn't disobedience, it's self-preservation." Bennett's forces executed another coordinated movement, demonstrating why genuine cooperation between horse and rider proved superior to mere conditioned response. Their precision showed understanding of the valley's defensive features that Vale's men fatally lacked. "Notice how Thunder analyzes developing situations," Eleanor suggested, as the stallion tracked multiple threats simultaneously. "He doesn't just react to immediate tactical changes. He anticipates operational patterns, adjusts his position to account for terrain modifications, coordinates his movements with Bennett's forces without explicit communication." Vale's curse carried genuine alarm as more of his men found their planned maneuvers compromised by the valley's carefully prepared features. Their mounts' growing agitation demonstrated why forced compliance would never match genuine tactical partnership. "Your men's training becomes their liability," Eleanor noted, while activating another sequence of defensive measures. "They respond to situations according to established protocols and execute maneuvers based on military experience, but against a warhorse operating in prepared terrain." She paused as Thunder demonstrated another aspect of his capabilities. "Those same protocols make their movements predictable. Bennett's forces maintained their containment, while Vale's increasingly frustrated lieutenants discovered more of their tactical options, eliminated by Eleanor's defensive system. The growing chaos showed exactly why superior numbers meant nothing. Against proper preparation and genuine battlefield awareness, each modification to this valley, Eleanor explained as Thunder emphasized her words, was designed with specific tactical responses in mind. How mounted units naturally react to uncertain terrain, how military training influences operational decisions, how standard cavalry protocols can be turned against those who rely on them. Vale's face showed dawning comprehension as another of his planned positions proved untenable. The storm's intensity perfectly matched the growing realization among his men that they faced something far more sophisticated than conventional military opposition. "Consider your current tactical situation," Eleanor suggested, while Thunder's muscles coiled beneath her touch. "Every movement your men make, based on their training and experience, forces them deeper into compromised positions. Their military precision, rather than providing advantage, makes their responses predictable and exploitable." Bennett's forces executed another coordinated maneuver, forcing more of Vale's men into increasingly vulnerable positions. Their movements demonstrated understanding of the valley's defensive features that came from genuine partnership rather than conditioned response. This confrontation serves multiple purposes, Eleanor announced as thunder crashed overhead. Beyond demonstrating why force and superior numbers prove inadequate against proper preparation, it shows why Blackwood's obsession with controlling, through conditioning, what can only emerge through trust will never succeed. Vale watched in mounting frustration as his carefully planned assault continued deteriorating into chaos. The valley's defensive features, combined with Thunder's tactical awareness, transformed standard cavalry maneuvers into compounding disadvantages. Each aspect of this engagement, Eleanor continued, while her hands found another concealed mechanism, proves why genuine partnership between horse and rider will always surpass mere military training. Your men try to maintain formation, execute coordinated movements, secure tactical positions, but in terrain specifically designed to exploit those protocols. Thunder's ears tracked multiple threats as Vale's lieutenants attempted another coordinated advance. The stallion's body language demonstrated why force and superior numbers meant nothing against genuine tactical awareness and proper preparation. Observe how your mounts respond, Eleanor suggested, as more of Vale's men found their planned routes compromised. Their natural instincts warn them of dangers their riders ignore. That resistance isn't lack of training, it's demonstration of why trust proves more valuable than conditioned obedience in genuine tactical situations. Bennett's forces maintained their methodical containment, while Vale's increasingly frustrated men discovered more of their military experience rendered useless by Eleanor's defensive system. The mounting chaos showed exactly why force and superior numbers proved inadequate against genuine partnership between horse and rider. The storm's intensity shifted as Eleanor activated another sequence of the valley's defensive measures. Strategic depth, she explained while Thunder's ears tracked multiple threats, isn't just about having multiple layers of defense. It's about understanding how each element influences your opponent's tactical decisions. Through gaps in the Barnes' modified structure, Vale's increasingly frustrated lieutenants discovered more of their planned positions, compromised by carefully prepared terrain features. Their mounts' growing resistance demonstrated why forced compliance proved inadequate against genuine tactical awareness. Consider the psychological aspects, Eleanor suggested, as Bennett's forces executed another coordinated movement. Every defensive feature serves multiple purposes: physical obstacle, tactical constraint, and psychological deterrent. Your men's training compels them to respond in predictable patterns, each response leading deeper into prepared containment zones. Thunder's muscles rippled beneath her touch as Vale's remaining units attempted to establish new tactical positions. The stallion's body language communicated volumes about the difference between military precision and genuine battlefield awareness. Marshal Bennett's forces, she noted while activating another hidden mechanism, understand something your men haven't grasped. The valley's defensive system doesn't just restrict movement, it influences decision-making itself. Each tactical choice becomes more limited, more predictable, as terrain features guide mounted units into increasingly vulnerable positions. Vale cursed as another section of seemingly solid ground proved treacherous for his forces. The rain's intensity perfectly matched the growing realization among his men that they faced something far more sophisticated than conventional military opposition. Fascinating aspect of proper tactical preparation, Eleanor continued while Thunder tracked multiple sources of movement. It's not enough to anticipate your opponent's immediate responses. You must understand how their training influences operational decisions, how standard protocols become vulnerabilities when terrain itself actively opposes their movement. Bennett's forces maintained their containment, while Vale's increasingly desperate lieutenants discovered more of their military experience rendered useless by Eleanor's defensive system. The mounting chaos demonstrated exactly why superior numbers meant nothing against proper preparation and genuine tactical awareness. Notice how Thunder analyzes developing situations, she suggested, as the stallion shifted his weight with precise calculation. He doesn't just react to immediate threats or follow tactical protocols. He assesses battlefield dynamics independently, anticipates operational patterns, chooses optimal responses based on genuine understanding of terrain advantages. Vale watched in mounting frustration as his carefully planned assault continued deteriorating. The valley's defensive features, combined with Thunder's tactical awareness, transformed standard cavalry maneuvers into compounding disadvantages. "Your men's training," Eleanor explained, while activating another sequence of defensive measures, teaches them to maintain formation, establish clear lines of communication, secure tactical positions. But in terrain specifically designed to exploit those protocols. She paused as another section of ground shifted treacherously. Those same principles become tactical liabilities. Bennett's forces executed another coordinated movement, demonstrating why genuine cooperation between horse and rider proved superior to mere conditioned response. Their precision showed understanding of the valley's defensive features that Vale's men fatally lacked. Each modification to this landscape, Eleanor continued, as Thunder emphasized her words, serves multiple strategic purposes, beyond physical. Obstacles or tactical constraints, they create psychological pressure that influences military decision-making. Your men respond according to their training, each response making their movements more predictable, more vulnerable to prepared countermeasures. Vale's face showed dawning comprehension as more of his planned positions proved untenable. The storm's intensity perfectly matched the growing realization among his forces that they faced something far more sophisticated than conventional military opposition. "Consider how your mounts react," Eleanor suggested, while Thunder's muscles coiled beneath her touch. Their natural instincts warn them of dangers their riders ignore. That resistance isn't disobedience, it's demonstration of why genuine tactical awareness surpasses mere military training in actual combat situations. Bennett's forces maintained their methodical containment, while Vale's increasingly frustrated lieutenants discovered more of their tactical options eliminated by Eleanor's defensive system. The mounting chaos showed exactly why force and superior numbers proved inadequate against proper preparation and genuine battlefield awareness. Each aspect of this engagement, Eleanor announced as Thunder crashed overhead, demonstrates why Blackwood's obsession with controlling through conditioning what can only emerge through trust will never succeed. Your men try to maintain military precision, execute coordinated maneuvers, secure tactical positions, but in terrain specifically designed to exploit those protocols. Thunder's ears tracked multiple threats as Vale's remaining units attempted another coordinated advance. The stallion's body language demonstrated why force and superior numbers meant nothing against genuine tactical awareness and proper preparation. The valley's defensive features, Eleanor explained while her hands found another concealed mechanism, weren't designed simply to restrict movement or create obstacles. They're calibrated to influence tactical decision-making itself. Each modification guides mounted units into positions that compromise their military effectiveness, transforming their training into vulnerability. Vale watched in mounting frustration as his carefully planned assault continued deteriorating into chaos. The valley's defensive features, combined with Thunder's tactical awareness, demonstrated why conventional military responses proved inadequate against properly prepared terrain. "Observe how Thunder coordinates with Bennett's forces," Eleanor suggested, as more of Vale's men found their planned routes compromised. No explicit communication needed. Genuine tactical awareness allows immediate understanding of developing situations. Your men try to maintain formation, execute standard protocols, but against a warhorse operating in prepared terrain. The storm's intensity shifted again as Eleanor activated another sequence of defensive measures. Vale's increasingly desperate lieutenants discovered more of their military experience rendered useless by the valley's carefully prepared features. Their mounts' growing resistance demonstrated why forced compliance could never match genuine tactical partnership, strategic depth. Eleanor continued, while Thunder tracked multiple sources of movement. Requires understanding how terrain features influence both physical movement and psychological response. Your men's training compels them to react according to established protocols, each reaction making their tactical situation more precarious, more predictable. Bennett's forces executed another coordinated maneuver, forcing more of Vale's men into increasingly vulnerable positions. Their movements demonstrated understanding of the valley's defensive features that came from genuine partnership rather than conditioned response. Consider the cumulative effect, Eleanor suggested as Thunder emphasized her words. Each tactical decision your men make based on their military experience leads them deeper into compromised positions. Their training, rather than providing advantage, becomes liability in terrain, specifically designed to exploit standard cavalry responses. Vale's curse carried genuine alarm as another section of ground proved treacherous for his forces. The rain's intensity perfectly matched the mounting tension as his men discovered more of their planned maneuvers, compromised by Eleanor's defensive preparations. "This confrontation," Eleanor announced while Thunder's muscles coiled beneath her, "touch serves to demonstrate why genuine partnership between horse and rider will always surpass mere military training. Your men try to maintain tactical cohesion, execute coordinated movements, secure defensive positions, but against a war horse operating in prepared terrain." Bennett's forces maintained their containment, while Vale's increasingly frustrated. Lieutenants discovered more of their tactical options, eliminated by Eleanor's defensive system. The mounting chaos showed exactly why force and superior numbers proved inadequate against proper preparation and genuine battlefield awareness. Each modification to this valley, Eleanor continued as Thunder crashed overhead, was designed with specific tactical responses in mind. How mounted units naturally react to uncertain terrain, how military training influences operational decisions, how standard cavalry protocols can be turned against those who rely on them. Thunder's ears tracked multiple threats as Vale's remaining units attempted another coordinated advance. The stallion's body language demonstrated why force and superior numbers meant nothing against genuine tactical awareness and proper preparation. "Your men's formation reflects classic cavalry doctrine," Eleanor observed, as Vale's lieutenants attempted another coordinated advance. "Maintain tactical cohesion, establish clear lines of sight, secure elevated positions, but observe how Thunder anticipates these standard protocols." The stallion's weight shifted subtly, his positioning demonstrating intimate knowledge of how military units respond under pressure. Through gaps in the barn's structure, Bennett's forces continued their methodical containment, each movement exploiting the valley's carefully prepared features. "Notice the interplay between natural terrain and modified elements," Eleanor suggested, while activating another hidden mechanism. Stream beds that appear normal but channel mounted movement in specific directions. Rock formations positioned to create tactical bottlenecks. Even the vegetation serves strategic purposes. Certain trees placed precisely to influence line-of-sight calculations. Vale's face showed growing comprehension as more of his planned escape routes proved compromised. The storm's intensity perfectly matched the mounting realization among his men that conventional military responses only worsened their tactical situation. Each defensive feature, Eleanor explained, as Thunder's ears tracked multiple threats, was designed with specific psychological factors in mind. How cavalry units assess terrain under combat conditions, how experienced officers calculate tactical advantages, how military training influences operational decision-making. Bennett's forces executed another coordinated maneuver, demonstrating understanding of the valley's defensive system that came from genuine partnership rather than conditioned response. Their movements highlighted why superior numbers meant nothing against proper preparation and authentic tactical awareness. Consider how the modified terrain affects mounted combat dynamics. Eleanor continued while her hands found another concealed. Control. Slopes that appear gentle but destabilize cavalry charges, clearings that seem to offer tactical advantage but expose units to prepared countermeasures. Ground that looks solid until specific pressure triggers carefully engineered instability. Vale watched in mounting frustration as his carefully planned assault deteriorated further. The valley's defensive features, combined with Thunder's tactical awareness, transformed textbook cavalry maneuvers into compounding disadvantages. Your officer's experience becomes liability, Eleanor noted, as more of Vale's men found their positions compromised. They recognize standard tactical patterns, attempt to exploit what appear to be conventional terrain features. But each assessment, each military response, guides them deeper into prepared containment zones. Thunder's muscles coiled beneath. Her touch as Vale's remaining units tried to establish new defensive positions. The stallion's body language demonstrated why force and regimented training proved inadequate against genuine battlefield awareness. Observe how Thunder coordinates multiple tactical elements simultaneously, Eleanor suggested, while activating another sequence of defensive measures. He tracks unit movements, anticipates terrain modifications, adjusts position to maximize strategic advantage, all without explicit commands. That's the difference between a conditioned response and an authentic partnership. Bennett's forces maintained their methodical containment, while Vale's increasingly desperate lieutenants discovered more of their military experience rendered counterproductive by Eleanor's defensive system. The mounting chaos showed exactly why rigid protocols failed against properly prepared opposition. The valley's design incorporates lessons from every major cavalry engagement of the border wars, Eleanor explained as Thunder emphasized her words. How mounted units react when standard tactics fail, how military training influences strategic adaptation, how experienced officers respond to deteriorating tactical situations. Vale's curse carried genuine alarm as another section of ground proved treacherous for his forces. The rain's intensity perfectly matched the growing tension as his men realized their conventional military responses only hastened their tactical collapse. Strategic depth, Eleanor continued while Thunder tracked multiple sources of movement, means understanding how each defensive element affects both immediate tactical choices and long-term operational capabilities. Your men's training compels specific responses, each reaction limiting their future options, making their movements increasingly predictable. Bennett's forces executed another coordinated maneuver, forcing more of Vale's men into compromised positions. Their movements demonstrated understanding of the valley's defensive features that came from authentic tactical partnership rather than regimented conditioning. Notice how your mounts resist certain approaches, Eleanor suggested, as more of Vale's planned routes proved untenable. Their natural instincts recognize dangers their riders ignore. That hesitation isn't failure training, it's demonstration of why genuine tactical awareness surpasses conditioned response in actual combat situations. The storm's intensity shifted again as Eleanor activated another sequence of defensive measures. Vale's increasingly frustrated officers discovered more of their military expertise rendered useless by the valley's carefully prepared features. Their mounts' growing resistance demonstrated why forced compliance could never match authentic tactical partnership. Through the intensifying storm, Marshal Bennett's voice carried clear authority as his forces continued their methodical containment. "Secure the western approach," he commanded, each order demonstrating intimate familiarity with Eleanor's defensive system. "Watch for destabilized terrain features." Eleanor's hands moved across Thunder's modified tack while observing Bennett's precise coordination. Interesting how paths cross, she addressed Vale's increasingly desperate men. The Marshal wasn't always a lawman. Before accepting his badge, he served with the 3rd Regiment's Support Division. Thunder's ears flicked forward as Bennett's forces executed another perfectly timed maneuver. The Stallion's recognition of their tactical patterns suggested shared history beyond simple military coordination. "Your intelligence reports missed crucial details," Eleanor noted, while activating another hidden mechanism. Like how Marshal Bennett spent 3 years studying the program's training methods, learning why genuine partnership between horse and rider transformed conventional military doctrine. Vale's face showed dawning comprehension as more of his planned positions proved untenable. That's why his men move differently. They understand the valley's defensive features from experience rather than observation. Precisely. Eleanor's confirmation carried weight as Bennett's forces demonstrated another aspect of their tactical awareness. Each member of his unit was chosen specifically for their understanding of how mounted combat changes when horses become partners rather than mere military assets. Through gaps in the barn's modified structure, Vale's increasingly frustrated lieutenants watched Bennett's men execute maneuvers that seemed to anticipate the valley's defensive responses. Their coordination demonstrated why authentic tactical partnership surpassed conventional military training. "Take Deputy Sarah Chen," Eleanor suggested, while Thunder tracked multiple threats simultaneously. Before joining Bennett's unit, she worked with frontier veterinarians studying equine behavior under combat conditions. Her insights proved invaluable in designing terrain features that influence mounted movement patterns. Bennett's voice carried, again, directing Chen's squad to secure another tactical position. Their execution showed a deep understanding of how horses naturally respond to modified terrain, using this knowledge to further compress Vale's rapidly diminishing options. Or consider James Martinez, Eleanor continued as Thunder's muscles coiled beneath her touch. Former cavalry scout who recognized why the 3rd Regiment's successes couldn't be replicated through standard military protocols. His experience helped shape how this valley's defensive features exploit conventional tactical assumptions. Vale watched in mounting frustration as Martinez's unit demonstrated this knowledge, using the terrain's carefully prepared elements to channel his men's movements into increasingly vulnerable positions. The rain's intensity perfectly matched their growing realization that they faced opposition far more sophisticated than simple military force. "Each member of Bennett's team," Eleanor explained while activating another sequence of defensive measures, "brings unique understanding of why partnership proves superior to conditioning. They don't just execute tactical maneuvers, they comprehend how genuine cooperation between horse and rider transforms combat dynamics. Each member of this operation," Eleanor explained as Thunder emphasized her words, "brings specialized knowledge that contributes to their tactical effectiveness." Former cavalry officers who recognized why partnership surpasses conditioning. Veterinarians who understand equine psychology under combat conditions. Scouts who grasp how terrain features influence mounted movement. Thunder's muscles coiled beneath her touch as Vale's remaining units attempted another coordinated advance. The Stallion's response demonstrated why genuine partnership between horse and rider transformed conventional military engagement into something far more sophisticated. The storm reached its peak intensity as Vale finally grasped the futility of his position. Through the rain, Bennett's forces had completed their containment while Thunder maintained perfect tactical positioning, every muscle ready for whatever choice the desperate captain might make. "Consider your situation carefully," Eleanor suggested, while her hands remained steady on Thunder's neck. "Your men trapped in compromised positions, their mounts increasingly resistant to commands, every standard military response leading deeper into tactical disadvantage. Yet I'm offering one last opportunity for a different choice." Vale's laugh carried bitter recognition as another section of ground shifted treacherously beneath his remaining forces. "Choice, like the choice you gave Blackwood's men at Broken Ridge, the choice that left half their unit buried in mountain slides." "No," Eleanor corrected, while Thunder's ears tracked multiple threats simultaneously. "A genuine choice. The same one I offered during the border wars, before Blackwood's obsession with control destroyed everything the program could have become. The choice between force and partnership, between domination and trust." Bennett's voice carried across the rain-soaked valley, directing his forces to maintain position while leaving clear routes for potential withdrawal. His tactical awareness demonstrated a deep understanding of how this confrontation needed to end. "Your men's mounts," Eleanor noted as more of Vale's planned positions proved untenable, "already understand what their riders refuse to accept. They recognize the fundamental difference between conditioned response and genuine tactical partnership. That's why they resist commands that would place them in compromised positions." Thunder's muscles rippled beneath her touch as Vale's lieutenants attempted one final coordinated maneuver. The stallion's body language communicated volumes about the difference between military precision and authentic battlefield awareness. "Each aspect of this engagement," Eleanor explained, while activating another sequence of defensive measures, "demonstrates why force and conditioning will never replicate what genuine partnership achieves. Your men try to maintain formation, execute standard protocols, secure tactical positions, but in terrain specifically designed to exploit those same military principles." Vale's curse carried genuine comprehension as another section of ground proved treacherous for his forces. The mounting chaos showed exactly why superior numbers meant nothing against properly prepared opposition guided by authentic tactical awareness. "Marshal Bennett's forces," Eleanor continued as Thunder emphasized her words, "understand something your men have yet to grasp. They don't just execute tactical maneuvers, they comprehend why partnership transforms mounted combat into something far more sophisticated than mere military engagement." Through gaps in the Barnes' modified structure, Vale's increasingly desperate lieutenants watched Bennett's teams demonstrate this understanding. Their coordination showed why authentic tactical awareness would always surpass conventional military training. "But here's what fascinates me," Eleanor observed, while Thunder tracked multiple sources of movement. "Even now, facing undeniable proof that force and conditioning have failed, Blackwood continues his obsession with control. He sends men like you to capture what can only be freely given, to dominate what can only be earned through trust." The storm's intensity perfectly matched the growing realization among Vale's men that they faced something far more sophisticated than conventional military opposition. Their mounts' increasing resistance demonstrated why forced compliance could never match authentic tactical partnership. "Your choice now," Eleanor announced as Thunder crashed overhead, "isn't about tactical advantage or military protocol. It's about recognizing why the 3rd Regiment's program succeeded where Blackwood's methods inevitably fail. Why genuine partnership between horse and rider transforms conventional warfare into something extraordinary." Vale watched in mounting frustration as his carefully planned assault completed its collapse into chaos. The valley's defensive features, combined with Thunder's tactical awareness, had systematically eliminated every standard military response. "Consider what you've witnessed here," Eleanor suggested, while her hands found another concealed mechanism. "How terrain features influence both physical movement and psychological response. How military training becomes liability when opponents understand mounted combat dynamics. How genuine partnership surpasses mere conditioned behavior in actual tactical situations." Bennett's forces maintained their methodical containment, while Vale's increasingly frustrated officers discovered more of their experience rendered counterproductive by the valley's carefully prepared features. Their mounts' growing resistance proved why forced compliance could never match authentic tactical awareness. Each member of this operation, Eleanor explained as Thunder emphasized her words, demonstrates why partnership proves superior to conditioning. From Bennett's specialized units to Thunder's tactical cooperation, genuine understanding transforms conventional military engagement into something far more sophisticated. Vale's face showed final comprehension as more of his planned positions proved untenable. The rain's intensity perfectly matched the mounting realization among his men that their conventional military responses only hastened their tactical collapse. "So choose," Eleanor announced while Thunder's muscles coiled beneath her touch. "Choose to understand why force and conditioning will never recreate what genuine partnership achieves. Choose to recognize why the 3rd Regiment's approach revolutionized mounted combat, while Blackwood's methods inevitably fail." The storm's fury seemed to pause as Vale made his decision. Through the rain, his voice carried genuine recognition of what this confrontation had proven. "Stand down," he commanded his remaining forces. "We've lost this engagement, but more importantly, we've lost the argument it represents." Thunder's ears tracked multiple sources of movement as Bennett's forces began securing Vale's surrendering. Men, the stallion's body language demonstrated why genuine partnership between horse and rider would always surpass mere military training. "Fascinating thing about choices," Eleanor observed while activating the final sequence of defensive measures. "They reveal fundamental truths about those who make them. Your decision here, Captain, suggests you've finally grasped why partnership proves superior to force, why trust achieves what conditioning never could." The rain began to ease as Bennett's teams completed their containment operation. Through the clearing storm, the valley's carefully prepared features stood as testament to why authentic tactical awareness would always triumph over conventional military doctrine. "Remember this moment," Eleanor suggested as Thunder provided final emphasis to her words. "Remember how terrain features influenced tactical decisions, how military training proved inadequate against genuine partnership, how force and conditioning failed where trust and cooperation succeeded." Vale's nod carried genuine understanding as his men surrendered their weapons. The confrontation had demonstrated more than tactical superiority. It had proven why the 3rd Regiment's approach to mounted combat would always surpass Blackwood's obsession with control. "Your report to Blackwood," Eleanor concluded while Thunder maintained perfect tactical positioning, "should explain why his methods will never succeed, why genuine partnership between horse and rider transforms conventional warfare into something extraordinary. Why trust, freely given and earned through respect, achieves what force and conditioning never could." The storm's final rumbles faded as Bennett's forces secured the last of Vale's men. Through the clearing sky, the valley stood as testament to why authentic tactical awareness, built on genuine partnership and trust, would always prove superior to mere military precision or conditioned response. In the end, Thunder's presence beside Eleanor demonstrated everything this confrontation had sought to prove: that true partnership, based on mutual trust and respect, transforms conventional engagement into something far more sophisticated than mere military doctrine could achieve. The legend of the widow with her battle-trained horse would grow, but more importantly, it would serve as a reminder that some things cannot be taken by force, only earned through genuine understanding and trust. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.